I'm Lynne Woodward. I head up the Equality and Diversity and Inclusion Unit in Leicestershire Police, and have been working there for many years. What I would like to say is what we're definitely not doing coming up and talking to you is saying we've got it right, because we genuinely haven't, and we have lots of issues, and we make mistakes and we do things wrong, but sometimes we do things right. And hopefully what I'm going to do is share some of the things we've done, particularly around transgender issues. So if I begin then a little bit about telling you the background. So the national picture in policing, we have a national structure within the police service, whereby I'm going to talk a bit about that. Sorry, I've just realised this is another slide put in. I'm going to talk to you a bit about our Leicestershire Police and our staff, and also the LGBT community in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, and I'm going to wind up by telling you about the future. So, our national picture in policing then, we have a National Police Chief Constable's rep called Julie Cook, who is the ACC of Merseyside Police, and her role within the police service nationally is to drive the LGBT agenda forward. And she spends a lot of her time particularly engaging with police services networks, trying to change legislation, trying to lobby government, particularly lobbying the Home Office around hate crime, particularly aimed at the LGBT community. And she meets regularly with other staff networks as well, trying to look at the intersectionality across people's identities. We've had a national LGBT network since 1995, so well over 20 years, and in that time it's had peaks and troughs, in the same way diversity and inclusion goes through peaks and troughs. We've also had a National Trans Police Association since 2008, so already you can see that transgender identity took a lot longer within the police service to come to the fore and to get noticed. So then we talk about Leicestershire Police and what we're doing internally then. So, within our structure, within Leicestershire Police, we have a chief officer lead. So every one of our chief officers has a responsibility for one area or two areas of equality and diversity. And their role really is to drive that agenda, be the leader within the organisation, and to actually be the advocate, not just for that area, but for equality and diversity across the piece. So our Chief Constable chairs our strategic board, and on that strategic board is every one of our chief officers, along with most of our senior managers. So this is not something that's put to HR, it's not something that's put down a few levels within the organisation. Our chief very much believes leadership is the key. We've had an LGBT network since the 1990s, and we've given funding and support to that network for most of that time, probably not in the early 1990s. So what we effectively give them is the equivalent of 26 days a year to work on LGBT issues. So that's the chair of the network. We give them finance, we give them the ability to bid into a joint initiative pot, to do joint work with the other networks, because the idea of our equality and diversity agenda is together we are stronger, and actually encouraging all the networks to work together. In terms of transgender issues, it's taken us a lot longer as a service to come to the fore in terms of understanding this issue. And if I've got time, I will read you a personal story which actually transformed for us in Leicestershire the Police the way we dealt with transgender issues. Our guidance was as late as 2013, I'm afraid. We regularly recognise all the major dates, so we do stuff for LGBT History Month, for Ida Hobbit Day, for Transgender Remembrance Day. We fly our flag, which for those of you who know anything about policing, 15 years ago, that was really controversial when we started flying an LGBT flag outside our headquarters. I can't tell you how many letters we had in the Mercury about that. We publish articles both internally and externally, and we respond to government consultations. So we did an awful lot in Leicestershire Police around responding to the Gender Recognition Act and our dismay at some of the things that was in there. We also do engagement with trade unions and staff associations in Leicestershire Police and in most police forces in the country. The major union is Unison. They have their own self-organised groups, particularly around race, faith, gender, LGBT issues and disability. So we work with them. We enter Stonewall and we enter Stonewall benchmarking, and I'll talk a bit about that in a bit. We received our highest ranking in 2017 and we reached 15, and I know certainly our Chief Constable is very proud of that fact. We do struggle, however, with some of the Stonewall benchmarking. We struggle with some of the questions because we believe some of it is tokenistic. We struggle with the fact that until very recently they didn't include trans, and we struggle with the fact that there is less emphasis on community engagement. Having said that, it is a workplace equality index, so we do understand that. So whilst we engage in Stonewall, and I would say it's been one of the drivers for us for improving our LGBT equality, that's not universally felt throughout the whole of the service, and many police forces don't enter Stonewall. We engage with the National LGBT Network and the National Trans Police Association, which, particularly for the National Trans Police Association, for us is really key because the number of officers across the country who identify as transgender are very, very small, and so therefore having a national group is really useful for us. So, if you bear with me and give me some latitude, what I will do is read a story of a police officer called Annie. Annie was a long-standing police officer in our force, front line, never done anything but front line. And Annie wasn't Annie, Annie was Andrew, and Andrew decided to come out as transgender. And this is what Andrew put on our intranet site, and this fundamentally, more than anything else we'd ever done, transformed how people felt about transgender issues. So if you bear with me. When we all moved to Euston Street a few years ago, I was allocated a locker right in the corner at the bottom of the row. No good for a 6'8" galoot like me, so obviously I swapped my numbered padlock for one in a far better position. It now could be yours. It's well lit, good access, and end of terrace, so I was able to hang stuff off the side of it. I then expertly nailed 2 shelves into it and stuck self-adhesive hooks all round the walls, 8 foot above the floor, so I could use them. This locker and adjacent hook facility could now be yours for a very reasonable monthly fee, as apparently I can't take it with me. For those of you that don't yet know, I'm about to come out as transgender, which basically means I plan to present as female at work from Monday the 11th, 2016. There's plenty of stuff on the internet to explain what transgender is, and as far as I have seen, everyone's experience is totally different. There's been a lot of stuff in the media about it lately, much of it oversimplified and sensationalised in the mainstream. So please don't just pick a character and assume I'm going to be following the same path as them, as it doesn't work like that. If you want to know why I'm doing this, then feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer. It might be hard, as to be honest, I haven't got anywhere near working it out yet. I'm pretty much living by gut instinct, and at the moment, as trying to rationalise it hasn't worked for me. I've never felt too bad at work, as I guess I was playing a role to a certain extent. At other times there, I have begun to feel incomplete somehow, say about 60% of what I perceive others feel to be fulfilled. When I present as female, I feel better about myself. It just feels right somehow. I'm married, and my partner is supporting me in this, despite it not being quite what she originally signed up for. We have both had to make compromises for when I am at home, for both our sakes. And what I would ask is that on that front, you respect my privacy in relation to this, as any publicity at this stage would be disastrous for my family. For this reason, I'm coming off shift for the first time in over 15 years to limit my exposure whilst everybody gets used to this. I've no doubt that it would get out eventually, but it would be better if there was a bit of a phased disclosure going on, as we've enough to cope with at the moment. I'm moving to the Equality Unit on attachment for the time being, where I hope I can do something constructive with my experiences, both on the streets and with what's been going on in my own life. I'll be getting a new collar number, as I think it might save awkwardness later on. So the collar number, with one careful owner, is also up for grabs. So maybe we could do a deal if you have the locker as well. This is already longer than my longest ever working sheet. I fully accept and realise that people won't have been exposed to one of me before, and that it will take many time to get used to it. I'll be calling myself Annie with a female pronoun. They still sound a little odd to me, to be honest, but then so do male ones, so I guess I'll go with it. If you can't cope with that, just use my name. If you forget and get it wrong, I won't get upset, unless I think you're intentionally being an arse about it, in which case I'll explain it further as I lift you up off the floor. What I would like to say is that the response I've had so far has been universally fantastic, and the level of acceptance and support has far exceeded what I thought was ever possible. And I would like to thank you all again for all your kind words so far. Okay, a few people didn't believe me to start with, but I've only got myself to blame, as I am a career wind-up merchant. But this isn't a wind-up, I promise you. Now, Annie got 4,028 reads for that, which is pretty amazing, since we've only got 3,800 staff. So we're pretty sure that actually people got volunteers to come in who've got collar numbers to read it, and actually it went viral within the organisation. Annie, got loads and loads of positive comments and support, and we allowed Annie to come into our unit for a period of just short of a year. Annie is now a fully functional, operational officer who isn't going out on the streets. She has experienced some quite horrendous hate on the streets because Annie is 6'8". So as you can imagine, she does stand out without a shadow of a doubt. But she's now in a specialist unit using all her policing skills rather than being in the Dream Factory, which is the Equality Unit and headquarters, as we're called. But absolutely, without any doubt whatsoever, Annie's story changed the culture of our organisation overnight, because people had known Andrew and suddenly thought, oh my gosh, this is somebody I know really, really well, and the story resonated everywhere. As a result of that, we updated our guidance, and we did continual training and awareness and internal workshops. And I would just speak a little bit about training. It's really interesting. One of the things we did probably about 3 months ago, 2.5 months ago, was to do some training around banter, because banter is rife in the police service. I don't know if that's the case within the NHS. As a result of that, I got plastered over every front page of every newspaper. I got death threats. I got all sorts of stuff around the fact that how on earth could you waste public money talking about banter? Because isn't banter just banter? Well, the reality is banter isn't just banter, and it destroys lives. And we needed our staff and our officers to understand that there is a line. Absolutely, we want people to have fun at work, but there is an absolute line which if you cross, be prepared to be put under sanction, be given a warning. And we've actually sacked 4 officers probably at the beginning of the last year for WhatsApp messages that they sent, which were beyond anything that any reasonable person could deem to be acceptable. But the interesting thing was the media had criticised us 2 weeks before, not Leicestershire Police, but the police service nationally, for not tackling harassment and bullying at work, and then pilloried us, and I mean absolutely pilloried us, for putting on some banter training. And if you want to read a particularly toxic website, look at Men and Justice for Men and Boys website, which have a toxic female of the month, and they are really anti-women to an amazing degree. Anyway, so that's a bit about some of the training we've done. We also, as a result of Annie's story, had 2 staff who identified as gender fluid, and they now have a male identity and a female identity with accompanying badges and collar numbers within our organisation. So these are just a few pictures of Pride. Pride I've done many, many times with Sandy in Leicestershire, so I think there are a couple of slides which were... We do a heavy presence at Pride. We have officers in uniform. If you can just go back, you see the one with the riot shield. I can't tell you how much hate stuff we got for that. It was absolutely amazing. How much did we spend on transforming a riot shield into a rainbow riot shield? Well, we'd spent no money because it was done by volunteers, and it was an old riot shield which was no longer functional. But you would be amazed how much hate we got for that. It was incredible. So, the community then, we have a lot of engagement with our LGBT community, and we have a specifically active LGBT community centre in Leicester, who actually run a trans centre of excellence, which is lottery funded. So we do a great deal of work with them. As a result of that, we do have an LGBT independent advisory group, which meets quarterly, which tells us some of the issues that we need to take on board, and that actively and critically help us to improve the service for the community, but also for our staff. Engagement at events like Pride, but nevertheless, despite all this work, we know hate crime is underreported. And I hate to say the B word, but Brexit has absolutely caused an explosion for us in LGBT hate crime, just as much as it has in terms of race hate crime and faith hate crime. It seems to have unplugged something where people seem it's okay now to be rude and abusive to people. And I guess in some ways that comes from the dialogue that our own politicians are using, which inflame that kind of messaging. And we do need to increase our confidence amongst all communities, because everyone's got a view about policing. It's the same as everyone's got a view about the NHS, haven't they? So the future for us is we're very fortunate that we have a Police and Crime Commissioner who is absolutely committed to the equality agenda and actually increased the precept of the budget, local council budget, last year and enabled us to recruit our second positive action officer. So we now have new off the blocks, our new positive action strategy, and we're looking at increasing representation across all those areas where we've got underrepresentation, LGBT being one of them. We're looking at recruiting more diverse members of the IAG, and in particular the intersectionality debate, because a lot of our members of our IAG are white, and we know as all the debate here has said, actually we need to get more diversity there. We also spend a lot of time trying to share some of the things we do with our partners. And, you know, we have what we call a Leicestershire Equalities Forum. Sandy used to be a member of that when she worked in Leicestershire. And the idea is to don't reinvent the wheel. If something works, tell us about it. Let's share. Let's do some good stuff. We also are absolutely wedded to committing resources into increasing the reporting of hate crimes, because we absolutely know that's a critical area for every police service in the country. We're also looking at further training for our staff and volunteers, and we're actually looking at developing a local LGBT standard with our partners, which we will then benchmark ourselves against. As I said, we would still absolutely 100% do Stonewall, but there are elements of Stonewall benchmarking that we think is missing, so we're looking at a local standard. So finally then, what has made the difference for us in terms of our journey? And as I said at the outset, we're definitely not saying we've got it sorted. Leadership. Without an absolute shadow of a doubt, I've worked under 4 chief constables, and I can absolutely hand on my heart say one of the reasons why we've moved this agenda forward so rapidly in the last 8 years is our Chief Constable, Simon Cole. He's absolutely committed to equality and absolutely committed to LGBT equality. And his Assistant Chief Constable has responsibility for LGBT equality. And Simon is constantly saying, what have you done? What are you tweeting? What have you done in this area of work? So it's not a passive leadership role. Being able to focus on the areas in the Stonewall benchmarking enabled us to move HR forward. And I would say that was the biggest thing for us about the Stonewall benchmarking. I can't tell you how many times. And it was interesting that Wanda said, you know, about the inclusive pensions or the inclusive benefits. I can't tell you how many times we had conversations with HR and they'd go, oh, no, it's okay. But we managed to, because of the Stonewall benchmarking, because we had a chief that actually wanted to get high up in the Stonewall benchmarking, we had an assistant chief constable who was developing an internal group that was driving forward the Stonewall agenda. We made progress with HR because the chief and the ACC made the HR director accountable. The third area that I think has made huge progress for us, and it's an odd one, but it's procurement. We have a head of procurement that over the years has become an absolute champion for all areas of equality, specifically LGBT equality. And we now have a position now where we turn away people who apply to us, whose equalities standards don't meet what we think is a reasonable standard to meet in this day and age. And I can't tell you the number of times I've had personal conversations with companies who've had rejection from us as being on our approved suppliers list, and then they go into an argument with you about, what do you mean we're not equality compliant? We've got a contract with the local authority, we've got a contract with the Home Office, and it was like, yeah, but your legislation is out of date, you haven't reviewed your policy for 10 years, you show disregard for specific areas of equality, and we just don't want to do business with you. And that's driven by our procurement section, which is incredibly helpful. And I know Ian's really proud to say that actually we get full marks in our procurement in the Stonewall. Working with partners, absolutely. We couldn't do what we do without working with partners and sharing resources. And finally, our support networks. We have 8 within Leicestershire. So we have 4 faith-based. We have one based around Christianity. We have a Muslim, a Sikh and a Hindu police association. And we also have a disability support network, an LGBT support network, a women's inclusive network, and a disability support network. I think I've said LGBT network. All of those networks meet with me every 2 months. We share agendas, we share work, we try to do joint initiatives. And the networks have the strapline of Together We Are Stronger. And it's all about the intersectionality debate, because at different times in your life, one part of your identity comes to the fore more than other parts of your identity. And it's really important that we just don't pigeonhole people into one identity, because in my view, that's quite lazy and it can enable even more stereotypes. So basically, that's a skip around Leicestershire Police.